Imagine a world where high-stakes diplomacy crumbles in an instant and economic warfare takes center stage. That's the dramatic reality unfolding as the U.S. unleashes powerful new penalties on Russia's energy giants. But here's where it gets controversial. Could these moves truly pressure Vladimir Putin into peace talks, or are they just a symbolic jab that might backfire on global markets? Stick around as we dive into the details of this tense geopolitical standoff, and you might be surprised by the twists that most headlines skip over. In a bold shift, the White House rolled out fresh sanctions aimed squarely at Russia's vital energy sector, following President Donald Trump's abrupt decision to scrap a planned summit with Vladimir Putin. This happened right after Putin turned down America's ceasefire conditions during talks about Ukraine. On Wednesday, Trump declared that the U.S. would zero in on two of Russia's most prominent oil firms, Rosneft and Lukoil, with the goal of crippling the Kremlin's war financing through oil revenues. But it's not just America flexing its muscles. The European Union chimed in with its own set of penalties, including a gradual prohibition on importing Russia's liquefied natural gas, LNG. Unlike an instant shutdown, this ban will phase out over time to ease the transition. Additionally, the EU package introduces stricter travel limits for Russian diplomats across the Schengen area and blocks 117 vessels from Russia's shadow fleet, unofficial ships often used to dodge sanctions, from docking at European ports. These U.S. actions represent a notable pivot in Trump's approach to Putin, especially after their relationship frayed on Monday. Trump himself described the sanctions as tremendous, emphasizing their scale against Russia's top oil players during a press briefing in the Oval Office. He expressed hope that they wouldn't linger long, tied to resolving the conflict. "We hope the war will be settled," he added, positioning the measures as a nudge to get Putin back to negotiations. "Hopefully he'll become reasonable, and hopefully Zelensky will be reasonable," Trump noted, using his famous "it takes two to tango" analogy to highlight the need for mutual compromise from all sides. While these initial oil-related restrictions might not immediately rock Russia's economy, the global ripple effects were immediate. Oil prices surged nearly 3%, or over $2 per barrel, right after the announcement. To amp up the pressure, the sanctions also warn of secondary penalties for foreign entities buying Russian oil. For beginners wondering what that means, secondary sanctions aren't just about the companies directly. They extend to punish third parties, like banks or nations, that continue trading with sanctioned entities, making it riskier for international partners to engage. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who visited the White House to present Europe's 12-point peace proposal, praised the move as a way to change the calculus for the Kremlin by ratcheting up the heat. Meanwhile, UK's Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper swiftly endorsed the package, echoing a recent parliamentary decision. "We must choke off the oil and gas revenues helping to fuel Putin's illegal war," she stated, underscoring the collective effort to starve the conflict of funds. Now, shifting gears to the summit drama, just last Thursday, Trump unveiled plans for a face-to-face with Putin in Hungary, sparking a wave of diplomatic buzz. But those hopes evaporated when Russia balked at ending hostilities along the existing Ukrainian battle lines. Confirming the cancellation in the Oval Office, Trump lamented how talks with Putin often start promisingly, yet fizzle out. "A lot of people are dying," he remarked, stressing the urgency for a deal. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio clarified that America remains open to dialogue, while Russia's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov insisted summit arrangements are still underway, just requiring careful planning. Tragically, in the wake of the cancellation, Russia unleashed over 400 missiles and drones on Ukraine, claiming 7 lives, including those of 2 young children. Putin also conducted nuclear missile tests and major military exercises, seemingly as a display of defiance. And this is the part most people miss. Amid all this, Trump justified his refusal to supply Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, citing the extensive training required. He argued it could take minimal 6 months or even a full year for Ukrainians to master the system, given its steep learning curve as a precision weapon. The administration had mulled providing these long-range missiles to aid Ukraine's defense, but Trump nixed the idea post-Putin chat, preferring to safeguard America's own stockpiles. It's a very powerful, very accurate weapon, and maybe that's what makes it so complex, he explained. NATO's Rutte backed Trump's stance, calling it completely right to hold back the missiles. He cautioned against overhyping any single weapon's potential to alter the entire conflict, noting that even with training, Ukrainians can't use them tomorrow. Interestingly, rumors swirled that the U.S. had relaxed guidelines for Ukraine to deploy existing long-range arms like Britain's Storm Shadow missiles, but Trump labeled those reports fake news. Delving into the nuts and bolts, these sanctions will immobilize any U.S.-held assets of Rosneft and Lukoil, while potentially penalizing banks or individuals interacting with them or their affiliates. Experts like Craig Kennedy from Harvard's Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies and formerly a high-ranking executive at Bank of America point out that the real impact hinges on enforcing secondary sanctions against buyers. The Treasury warned that dealing with these firms could lead to penalties for foreign banks involved. This puts countries like India and China, major purchasers of Russian oil, in the crosshairs. Kennedy described the effect as incremental rather than earth-shattering, contingent on the U.S. following through aggressively. It's not going to be seismic. It really comes down to whether they start putting calls through to people in India and China saying you shouldn't be buying this stuff, he elaborated. The measures could disrupt about 2 million barrels of Russia's daily oil exports, roughly a third of their total shipments. But here's the controversial kicker. Pushing secondary sanctions hard might spike global oil prices sharply by tightening supply, potentially hurting the U.S. and allies more than Russia, as Kennedy warned. The blowback to us might be worse than the impact on Russia. So, what do you think? Are these sanctions a smart way to force Putin to negotiate, or could they escalate tensions without changing much on the ground? Do you agree with withholding advanced weapons from Ukraine, or is it a missed opportunity? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss whether economic pressure can really bring peace, or if it's just adding fuel to the fire in this already volatile situation.